Great, and welcome to everyone who's tuning in and joining us for this virtual reception of Centered Mindfulness. I'm Heather Lorenz. I'm the Visual Arts Manager at the Northfield Arts Guild, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. If you want to adjust the slideshow and the presenters, you can, we're just gonna switch here to active. Hey Jan, would you mind muting? Thanks so much, perfect. Yep, awesome. And I think I clicked the right. Thanks for dealing with all the technological stuff as we figure all this out, and wonderful. So I want to start by thanking the Minnesota State Arts Board for their generous support of the Northfield Arts Guild. And thank you to all of our members, donors, and sponsors. Without your support, we couldn't do what we do to make great art happen here. So thank you for your continued support. I am just going to go through what this event is going to be like. I'm going to show a video or a photo overview of the exhibition. So you'll see some photos of the gallery. And then each of the artists are going to take some time and talk about their artwork along with the slideshow of their work, followed by a question and answer session. So if you're just joining us now, we will have a chance for you to ask questions of the artists. There's a chat box. If you go in where your options are and look for the chat, and there's a drop-down menu that says to all panelists and attendees, or you could select just to all panelists. If you want the question to be asked later on, make sure you hit all panelists so that I can see it and facilitate those questions later on. And following that will follow the artist remarks. So, oh, and feel free to send any messages to the artists too, because they would love to see your well wishes here. Oh, thanks, Monique. That's very sweet of you. I'm gonna go through some pictures of the show. We got I'm here in the gallery right now, but I'm gonna just show you some of the overall pieces here in the show. Centered Mindfulness features new and site-specific work by 6 regional artists: Marilyn Larson, Tim Lloyd, John Saurer, Jan Shoger, Elizabeth Simonson, and Michon. This exhibition has been in development for over a year, and it caps off the Guild's 60th season. The motivation behind this exhibition was to showcase artists who have developed a specific visual language that aims to shift viewers' perspective toward a more meditative view of the world. We'll go through some of these images. This exhibition around centered thought, meditation, and alternate ways of viewing the world seeks to understand the novel ways that these artists view and interpret the world through their work. And although each of these artists has a varied approach, during this event, viewers will experience the common themes and mindsets that they've used through repetitive forms, mathematical theories, grid systems, and circular structures. And we're really thankful to the artists for sharing their talents with us and for being here tonight. We're going to go to the artist remarks, and Marilyn Larson is going to start us off. She is joining us by phone. We were trying to get the technology in place, but she's here and is going to be able to talk about her work. Marilyn is a Minneapolis-based ceremonialist and artist, and I'm going to let her know. Marilyn, you're on, and we are looking at your 7-segment meander labyrinth, and you just tell me when you want me to go to the next slide.
All right, thank you, Heather. A meander can shake us loose by offering the opportunity to turn this way and that. And we place the meander at the entrance to the exhibit just to shake off any of the debris that we might be carrying with us to help move us into a receptive space of meditation. The 7th circuit or a 7-segment meander meander on the floor was made to fit in a hallway in my apartment when I didn't have enough room to walk an actual labyrinth. A labyrinth is an unfolded meander pattern that offers a place to practice change. So I invite you to come through this meander as we move onto the Troya bird pattern, the 11th circuit labyrinth. Next slide.
Got it.
I had a vision of 7 labyrinths spilling down a hillside and was able to realize this dream on a farm near Lanesboro. Here in a bluff-top meadow by the Root River, 7 different labyrinth patterns were installed in the form of the Pleiades star cluster. Various colors of surveyor flags and tape were used to create the labyrinths, which resembled pools of wildflowers from a distance. Several weeks of work culminated in a ceremony to celebrate creativity as the Sun and Pleiades were in alignment on May 20th. I decided to do portraits of the labyrinths before removing the flags. This is an 11th circuit classical labyrinth pattern found on Visby Island in Gotland, Sweden, probably made around 1300. It's known as the Troya bird pattern, and most of the extant labyrinth patterns do exist around the Baltic Sea. Next slide.
Got it.
So the Rose Nebula, I created a 7th circuit concentric labyrinth in gold paint on top of a rendition of the Rose Nebula to show a correlation of an abstract pattern to forms found in nature. These wall pieces are meant to be walked with hands as well as eyes. So one could stand at the wall facing the labyrinth and then move through the pattern with your hands while your feet are on the ground. To me, labyrinths are touchable art. They're participatory. As I touch the canvas with my paintbrush, I invite you as a viewer to touch the work as well. In the process of artistic expression, there is a constant back and forth of touching and viewing to create pattern can be traversed in a single flowing movement. This is an intimate invitation to participate in a meditative experience. The act of bringing forth a labyrinth design is meditative for me in whatever medium I use. The pattern itself evokes a sense of safety that allows me to expand and align internally. It is a timeless place. I tend to disappear as creative expression moves through me rather than from me. Next slide.
Okay. Got it.
So the Pleiades path is a labyrinth to be walked on the floor, and it was designed in 2009 really as a choreograph for a ceremony for 6 people to walk simultaneously and weave through each other while singing a song that was designed for the labyrinth. The 6-pointed star is representative of the 6 visible stars in the Pleiades. In mid, one of the 7th star has disappeared. The three-circuit labyrinth in the middle of the design represents that place of moving between realms, appearing and disappearing. The circle that encloses the whole pattern is a symbol for the sun, with the three-circuit labyrinth in the center representing that dot in the solar symbol. So this was a design specifically created for the May 20th ceremonial day when the sun aligns with the Pleiades. The Pleiades have been revered by peoples all over the earth, and I've been curious about the origin myths that follow with that. Next slide.
Got it.
This is the labyrinth that was created for the chapel at Carleton College. And I was painted in the chapel during student break in December of 2000. And I lay out a 23-foot canvas to create this seven-circuit modification of the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth. Organ music sometimes accompanied my work as people practiced. And I was able to incorporate the unique colors of the stained glass windows into the smaller triangular spaces between the paths. In this way, this labyrinth is truly unique to its site. The acrylic on canvas pattern is folded and stored to accommodate other events in the chapel. And I believe they bring it out on a regular basis for students to walk it weekly. Next slide.
It's up.
The Stussy Island Labyrinth at Carleton College is created in pavers inset in turf and gravel path. It was installed 19 years ago this summer, and two benches commemorating Carleton alumni who died on 9/11 were placed near it under 2 of 7 trees on the island. A leisurely walk over an arching wooden bridge prepares one for a deeper walk into the labyrinth. It was a gift of the Carleton class of 1951. Next slide.
Got it.
This is an image of a labyrinth at the Carondelet Center in St. Paul, near Fairview and Randolph. It's called the Garden Labyrinth, and it too is a modification of the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth pattern. It's a 3-circuit labyrinth that's contained within a ring of wildflowers of native plants, and the 3 circuits are walked, and there's another ring inside them with another band of the garden. And in the very center is the center of the labyrinth with the petals. So this is done in flagstone for the pausing stone at the center of the labyrinth, where one stands to decide what they'll lay down before they walk into a labyrinth and think about what they might walk with in their meditation. It was designed to bring people's attention to the earth, to the beauty and the bounty of the earth. And the pathways are mulch, and there are stones used to mark the lines. so people are encouraged to bend down and remove plants from the path as a way of being brought into contact with the earth as well.
Well,
There are, so I would just say I'm leaving the labyrinth. There are two pausing places where you enter. There's one, and then when you reach the center, and that is a place to come into alignment and be refreshed and reoriented. And as you walk out again, may you leave peace in your wake as you move out into the world.
well, thank you, Marilyn. And you, I know you said you invite people to go to these public labyrinths to experience them, like they're welcome to, they're up right now. So people, even if you can't be in the gallery, and if you're up in the cities right now, you could go experience these, so.
Right, and then the one at Carlton
Yep.
in Northfield.
Yes.
Is on Stussy Island.
Perfect.
And that's open all the time.
Yes, great. Well, thank you. I'm glad that we got this. Yep, you're getting applause. And Monique asked a question. We're going to do all the questions at the following all of the artist remarks. So I didn't forget you. We're going to get to it. So thanks so much, Marilyn. We're going to go on to Tim, and Tim Lloyd is a Northfield artist who is inspired by nature, and he's going to tell you more. Take it away, Tim.
Okay. Drawing for me has always been a way to get to the mind of another artist. Without the intent of making a work of art, the direct activity of putting marks on the surface gets close to the thinking of a person. For example, I love viewing the drawings of artists like Leonardo, Michelangelo, Picasso, where along the side of a page they might rethink or redirect the images that they made. It's something like I like to say, picking the brain of another human. This series of drawings of trees from an area of Minnesota's Arrowhead gives this group of graphite drawings, like I like to think, a sense of place, not only of boreal species, but that of old growth white pine, white spruce, balsam fir, but other instances of life of plants that were found along the shores of lakes and streams. I hope too that they give a glimpse of my thought process. I love graphite as a tool for mark making. For me, its spontaneity conveys how I'm mindful as I draw. It also gives me a chance to offer myself, and I hope others, a visual equivalency of that place. This series began as a chance to draw from places that I fell in love with. On the Arrowhead Trail in Cook County, there's a grove of old growth white pines, dating from the early 19th century, somehow escaping the lumberman's saw. My first encounter with the place, I was bowled over with their majestic quality. It reminded me of the redwoods I had seen in California. And the sound of the wind in the treetops was just ethereal. So I'd like to go through the individual drawings now, Heather. The two that you see on the screen, let's back up, there we go. Two of the one on the left, that small drawing, around the Arrowhead and close to Lake Superior, it seems to me it's always foggy. And this drawing, I've tried to describe that fact. The second tree, the second image that you see, it's a group of 3 spruces along the shore of Lake Superior. That's done in graphite. And the graphite I use is a very soft graphite. It's actually 9B, about as soft as graphite can get. And it comes in a stick that's like a piece of chalk. So these drawings have very strong blacks, and I hope that they also emote the fact that I'm actually there working very quickly and looking very carefully at the same time of these objects, the trees. Next. This one is also of a white pine with two main stalks in it, somewhat less aggressive, a little more attention to detail in the branches and less detail to the greenery. Next. Both of these drawings are about 7 feet tall and require 3 pieces of paper. As I started drawing them, I ran out of space on each one. The piece on the left-hand side is of a balsam fir, sorry, that grow in the area of their always reaching to the sky for light and growing very tall and thin. And often they don't live very long and they get knocked over with wind and storms. Well, this one managed to last for a long time. The piece on the right-hand side is one of those boreal white pines that missed the lumberman saw. They're in a grove on the Arrowhead Trail. There must be about 20 or 30 of these trees still there. And each year as I go, sometimes some of them have dropped their tops or something like that. So they're still staying there, but they're being decimated by time and weather and things of that nature. Next. This is a view of Lake Superior. All 3 of these, the 3 top are studies of rocks and geology and water. The bottom one is just the seashore, the lake shore along. I consider Lake Superior a sea since it has a tide and it's some of the waves are very high. They can get to be 20 feet high. So it's almost an ocean for me. Next. A spruce along the shore, again with very dark graphite and rather aggressive in its method of drawing and putting things down. Next. Another white pine. This time it shows the process of weather and time over a period of its life. It's bending. It was along the shore and the prevalent winds have started to make its inroad into the piece. Next. And these are the last 2. Both of them, well, the one on the left-hand side is balsam spruce, and the right-hand side is another white pine. In the bottom of the one on the right, you can see some evidence of what was happening under the paper that I had used as a drawing board. And I decided to leave it all just as a part of the drawing process. Next. This is what I mainly do in my life as an artist. I make jewelry and pieces out of metal. But these pieces are based on these drawings from trees and landscapes around northern Minnesota. This is a piece of, actually the pieces of wood are tumbleweed that I found going on a trip west and decided to bring those things forward. It's about 3 inches, 3 to 4 inches across, so it's very small. It's almost jewelry-like. Next. And this one, that is actually a piece of jewelry taken from one of the tree drawings that you saw beforehand. This one's it's hammered, and I leave the hammer marks in the piece as a kind of giving a history of the process of its making. Next. Oops, I think we missed one. There it is, birches. Again, sterling silver, and made out of made from flat sheets of metal that have been hammered and left with marks of that process of the making. This is also a piece of jewelry. So it's about 3 inches high and about 2.5 inches across. Thank you. Well, one more. Piece of driftwood. Driftwood is pretty prevalent around the edges of the lake. This piece is, again, in sterling silver and anodized niobium. The niobium is the color that you see in the center piece of the metal, with ranges from red to blue to green, yellow. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Yep, we'll do a virtual applause. Thanks so much, Tim. Next is Jan Shoger. She is a Northfield-based artist who says that her sketchbooks are chock full of drawings of nature. And take it away, Jan.
Hello, everyone. It is ironic, this series of drawings that you're seeing now were not done to be shown, not to be in this exhibit or any other exhibit. They happened because I was mesmerized by the huge shadows of trees, shadows that fell on the snow-covered slopes out in my backyard.
Hey, Jan, is there a way for you to get a little closer to your, it's just a little bit quiet.
Okay.
There.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. So these are the snow-covered slopes in my backyard. The shadows would shift as the sunlight shifted. Is that better? Good. I was caught up in watching the patterns of the shadows shifting. I drew many of them, not realizing that everything else had fallen away from my attention. I drew many of them, as I worked on these drawings, I was not aware of time passing or other surroundings or other thoughts on my mind. I was completely absorbed in the act of drawing what I was seeing. It was a new thing to see so intimately and so fully. It was truly meditative for me. Next. Drawing is a way of seeing, really seeing what is before us in all its complexity, really showing down, slowing down the eye to record with our hand the marks that reveal everything that we see. It is a process of only drawing what we can see and not what we think we know about what we see. It is going for a walk with a line, with a mark, letting your eye caress the contours of the object you're drawing and letting your hand move with your eye. This brings me to a book that I would like to share with you. And you probably can't see the title very well. And I will tell you that it is called The Zen of Seeing, Drawing and Seeing as Meditation by Frederick Frank. And Frank was one of the reasons I suggested to the Guild the possibility of Tim and I holding 2 drawing as meditation workshops this past spring in April and May. We could go to the next slide if you like. If participants had wanted to pin their workshop drawings to this wall for the exhibition with Marilyn, John, Elizabeth, and Michon, they could have. But when the COVID-19 virus forced the Guild to close programs and held in the Guild building, the workshops were canceled. No centered mindfulness workshops. The wall was empty. And it was then that Tim and I offered to hang some of our own drawings that took shape as forms of meditation. Next. Frank holds degrees in medicine and dentistry and fine arts, and he worked for 5 years with Albert Schweitzer in Lambaréné. He was the sole artist to record the Second Vatican Council in 62 to 65, and his drawings and paintings are in the permanent collection of MoMA and the Whitney Fogg Museum and Tokyo National Museum. Yet he is one of the most humble artists, that I have met. Years back, I had the good fortune of joining a class of Bardwell Smith's called the Zen of Drawing Workshop, led by Frederick Frank at Carleton College. It was an amazing experience both to meet Frank and to practice the form of meditation Frank spoke and writes of in this book about detaching ourselves from all distractions. We met that day in a windowless room. Next, please. 18 of us spread out, working silently. We were guided to find the way of inscape, of centering, so that all thoughts fell away, leaving us caught up with observing. He would say, look at the object in your eye until you feel it is looking back with you. Feel that you are one with it and that it is the most important thing in the universe. Most students in that workshop had never spent much time drawing, some saying, oh, I can't draw at all. Yet, as they were able to follow Frank's guidance, they began to really see aspects of the natural object and in these drawings, as the drawings unfolded, capturing each gesture of the object. Next. This, and maybe next. This early charcoal drawing later served as a stimulus for one of the images of a series of prints about shadows as metaphor for memories. This is the Japanese Hanga style woodblock, which we'll see now, called Which is Reality? My colleague, Meg Ojala, put me onto some extremely fast film so I could wander my neighborhood at night, capturing all sorts of foliage shadows on roads and sidewalks. And some of these shadow forms appear in these lithographs with monoprinting and hand coloring. Next. As we look at these prints about shadows and memories, I'd like to read you a poem I wrote called Looking Back. Next. Light takes shape because of darkness and shadow, and darkness takes shape because of light. Each needs the other to define it. The shadows can be a metaphor for memory. They reflect reality, but they are not the real experience. Next. Are the shadows and memories reality or just reflections about reality? Are they illusions? Are they hints of reality? What is reality anyway? Next. Does our memory trick us? Do we embellish or distort willingly or unwillingly in the same way a shadow flattens, elongates, diffuses, makes hazy the reflection of shapes? So these are some of the prints that grew out of these meditative drawings in black and white that you saw in the show. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on these, Jan. I'm going to advance, and this will be a good reminder too. If you have questions for the artists, please put them in the chat box. We are going to be going through those at the end here. And so next to present is John Saurer, and he's a Northfield-based artist and who likes to deal with multiples. And you're going to tell us more about your inspiration. So please take it away, John.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be with everybody. I'm out in Montana right now and working with some pirated Wi-Fi, so I hope that this goes smoothly. If I drop out, my apologies. This work represents a shift in my work from the abstract to work that is much more realistic. And that was influenced by a number of things, including this course that I love teaching. This is a January off-campus course titled Drawing from Nature in the Bahamas. And there are a couple images here that I gave to Heather, showing you the vast beauty and the color of this place. This is Little San Salvador Island, which is an outer island in the Bahamian chain. This is a course that yeah, this is a typical classroom. This is one of our favorite places, and I'm able to teach this way, which continues to blow my mind. The course is partnered with a biology course, an island biology course. So students often collaborate together. We look very closely at the different ecosystems that we are a part of, terrestrial plants and animals, aquatic plants and animals. We make collections and drawings. We're in the water every day, oftentimes underwater, even drawing and photographing underwater. And my course is a very simple beginning foundation perceptual drawing class. It was time for me to sort of depart from larger scale, abstract sculptures, installations, drawings and prints, and get back to a really formal, basic, analytical form of perceptual drawing. We work with really basic materials, and the students make really beautiful work. So it was from those experiences teaching abroad and teaching in the Bahamas, which sent me on my last sabbatical a couple of years ago. And all of the work that came out of that sabbatical was much more based in realism, based in the worlds that I'm living in, the different environments, ecosystems, including that around Minnesota and here in Montana. Let's go forward, Heather. Let's see what's next. These again are some images. Whoops. Just looking at pattern in nature. Here's a shot of just out the window here. This is just outside Bozeman, Montana. That's up on the M Trail. I think my daughter Anna took this picture. She has also fallen in love with this amazing landscape. This landscape of vast, open, wild, untouched spaces, which is really inspirational to me. Thinking about its history, thinking about its beauty, its vastness. This is just right outside town here. Montana is known as the Big Sky State, the Treasure State, of course, but I'm blown away, you know, everywhere I go. Standing in a trout stream, walking along a mountain path, riding down a highway on a motorcycle. Just the scope of the sky and the colors and spaces and textures. Chris Swanson took this just last week up at Lava Lake. It's about 10 miles from here. So recent drawings have included looking at this environment as inspiration for drawing. Let's jump ahead, Heather. See what, I forget the order of these. I'm a trout fisherman, I'm a fly fisherman. So I'm literally standing in trout streams practically every day, catching rainbow and brown trout and cut throat. The drawings that I'm making, again, you can see are influenced by the practices that we were preaching down in the Bahamas. And in this case, I'm using a wood burning tool, a very fine tip little red hot stylus to texture and to burn spaces into the paper. It's Thai mulberry paper, so it's very strong, but it's still very delicate and very light. In response to these subjects that are relatively vulnerable, lakes and streams, rivers, waterfalls, ponderosa pine, haystacks, the family farm, all these things are threatened ecologically and culturally. And this is what I've been focused on most recently here in the West. These massive haystacks, it's time to realize that, you know, summer is coming to an end when these massive stacks of hay begin popping up all over the prairie out there. Let's go one more ahead, Heather. Back one slide. Back up one, Heather, can you? One more. Thank you. Just this summer, I've been looking at these leaning river trees. When the bank of a large river erodes the trees. Gradually, the trees will compensate and begin to curve back toward the sky. So the most recent drawings, all the drawings this summer actually have been of these river trees. That's the Gallatin River up in Big Sky. And you can go to the next. There you go. And a little ponderosa, skinny little ponderosa pine up in Big Sky. And again, these river trees. These are 30 by 22 inches. Again, on time mulberry paper, and when I install them, they hang it away from the wall so that they are themselves really vulnerable and express that vulnerability of the subject. So on to the work that's in the show. This is a series of monoprints that I created here in Montana last summer, actually. There's 106 of them, I think. And one method that's acceptable for kind of biological collection is to collect objects and to press them and even to make impressions, to make monoprints from them. So last summer I created this series of prints. They're each 13 by 13 inches on Reeves BFK paper, black and white, working additively from objects themselves. And these are all objects that I find here in Montana and literally on the ground as I move through the landscape, both natural and man-made objects. There are feathers and grasses and gravel and leaves, but also scraps of paper and cigarette butts and pieces of garbage and plastic. And for this exhibition, I gave them all to Heather. I mounted them on these simple blocks and said, you can choose what you like and any arrangement that you like, given the proportions of the wall and the space in the gallery. I think she chose, I think there are 48, 4 high and however many long, 12 long, I think. Is that right, Heather? But there are twice as many more that will have to go up in another space. There were sometimes ghosts of previous impressions left on the plate of other objects, and I would just sort of run with that rhythm and response. Again, all from these objects that I find at my feet. I like to move as quickly as I can through life. I really like moving fast, and there are just a few things that really slow me down and force me to look at the world around me and to respond to that world. And drawing is one, making prints is another. Fly fishing certainly does that. You can't rush through these activities. So it's been great to balance that with the speed and to be able to show these in a show with other artists. And I titled the whole series just Tenderland, which is an opera, one of my favorite pieces by the American composer Aaron Copland. And it's just a metaphor for moving through this landscape and realizing its vulnerability and its beauty all at the same time. That's it.
We're all virtually
Thanks, everybody.
for you, so thank you. And just a technical thing to folks, I saw a raised hand, but I don't know how to find that and answer it. So if you have a question, just put it in the chat box because I know how to access that. So thank you. Thanks, John. We're gonna go on to Elizabeth Simonson, so Minneapolis-based artist who does site-specific work, and you're going to tell us more about that. Take it away, Elizabeth. Unmute yourself. Here we go. Yep. There we go.
Thanks. So before I became a visual artist, although I always I was always making art. My focus in life was that of a dancer. And when I did stop dancing and I went back to school, I ultimately was developing a master's degree in fine art. At that time, I was still painting abstractly and kind of loose gestural paintings. I loved making them. They were you know, beautiful. But I was kind of challenged by, why are you painting like a man from the 1950s? I mean, what is this work about? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was really focused on this interesting intersection between one brushstroke to the next, and like what was going on between those spaces. So I started doing a whole series of paintings where it was just black and white, and that's what I was doing. And as I was trying to create these examples of just over, under, over, I realized I was making mistakes in doing that. And that ultimately led to me exploring the whole notion of making work that was based on mistakes. So this piece is called Stampede, and it's an installation that ultimately got torn down, but it's about a 20-foot by 10-foot wall. And I would start at the top with just one row of tape, and I would just, as carefully as I could, follow the previous row. And eventually, little imperfections would develop. I just couldn't quite do it perfectly. So if you want to go to the next slide, you'll see how those imperfections, if I kept just following the imperfections, developed into the piece. And I would start at the top of the wall and go all the way down to the bottom, and whatever was left was what it was. So in a way, this very much relates to dance because there's a performative element to it, but the fact that it was based on sort of mistakes, I think, kind of explained to me, like, well, why am I working abstractly? I don't have to be making compositions of pretty shapes and colors or not so pretty shapes and colors. I wanted to make work that justified its own structure. That's what I wanted to do. So if you want to go to the next slide. It's kind of hard to see, but I did that same piece in white tape. You can go to the next slide. It's a little bit bigger. And you can see kind of how crazy it would get. But I would definitely go from the top of the ceiling and go all the way down and just keep following what I'd done before. So in general, I've kind of got like two systems that I work with. One is physical, which is like the tape work, where it's a combination of the medium or the physical material I'm working with under a strict sort of rule, like follow the course you've done before and just keep repeating it. But I do have another kind of set of logic that I work with often, if you want to go to the next slide. And this is a piece that's about 32 feet long. It's wire inserted into the wall. And all of the pieces of wire are exactly 3 feet long, but in the left side of the piece, each section of the wire is entered into the wall. I pre-drill it all, and they kind of go, so each end of the wire does a do-si-do around itself. And every time a complete circle occurs, it doubles, those two ends double in their distance apart. And I basically made a piece where I just saw that all the way through. And what does that look like? Well, this is what it looks like. So if you look at at the left side of the piece, two pieces of wire are like, they start an 1/8 of an inch apart. And if you keep going across the piece, they get farther and farther apart. If you go to the next slide, it's hard to see because it's kind of a small image, but those last, if you could just point at the very far right, those are the last pieces that they were as stretched out as far as they could. And I started realizing that I'm making work about the beginning, middle, and end of life forms. If you want to go to the next piece. By the way, that's what that piece looked like in a profile, which relates to the work I did at Northfield. You can go to the next piece. So I sort of decided to embrace the fact that I'm clearly talking about the beginning, middle, and end of life. All of my pieces sort of have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So then I started working with beads because I like the fact that they come in multiples, they are cellular in shape. And I started making these weird little like forms that, granted, they weren't as systematic as my prior work, but they were, they still had a logic to it that was kind of private to myself. And so if you go to the next piece, here's a larger version. So this piece is probably like 3 feet by 5 feet. It's a huge, big globe made up of beads, wire, fishing line. I like to work with material that everybody recognizes and knows. And then if you go to the next slide. So this is the piece I did at the Walker Arts Center. And it's basically a creation of the evolution of a globe. So if you look on the left side image and the lower part, that's the beginning of the globe as it expands. And then if you move it up, now you go to the middle one, half of it, it starts to become a circle. And then you go to the next one and it's all a globe. At this time, I was interested in the fact that there are so many kinds of life forms that metamorphosize themselves, like caterpillars to butterflies or tadpoles to frogs. And so this is called instar. And instar is a term that describes those stages of transformation. You can go to the next slide. So I was still playing around with these globes and that kind of stuff. And then I started working with string. And this is one of the first pieces I did where I actually had string engaged in the piece. This is called temple. It sort of reminded me of sort of like a Japanese temple of meditation. Small piece, it's only about this big. Then you can go to the next slide. And then I kind of went back to a more abstract notion. I just created a self-sustaining shape that then I strung up. So that's also not that big, it's only this big. You can go to the next slide. And then I decided to take it back to the wall like my prior work. And I did an installation in the corner with red thread. It was actually red embroidery thread and red plastic beads. And I didn't have enough time to go farther with it, but I really liked the way this looked, and it felt like I was combining so many practices that I had started to really understand. So basically I would well, let's go to the next slide. I just did this piece this summer, and it's sort of a realization of that earlier one I just showed you in the corner. I pre-strung the wire with plastic beads, and then on site I did I strung them. So it's kind of performative in that respect. And of course, again, this will come down. It has come down. And if I ever do it again, it'll be like a performance. I'll just do it again. You can go to the next slide. But these are a detail. You can get to sort of see how it's red plastic beads. The performance part of the work is when I do it on site, and I literally string each one. And I sort of felt like that's why I did the piece I did for Northfield, because the very act of making it, it does put me in a meditative state. So here it is in blue. And I'm going to continue to explore different shapes. I wanted to do a circular shape, sort of referencing, Mandela or something like that. But you can go to the next one. I probably, if I were to do this piece again, I would probably add at least 1 or 2 more layers just to get it more of a circle. You can go ahead. You can go to the next one. Anyway, there's not much more to say, but that's kind of how I got to making work like this. It was based on kind of a combination of doing installation, performative work, working with beads. In this piece I did at Northfield, I was able to create new shapes I hadn't done before. This is a perfect example of it. Heather, if you can just point right kind of in those intersections, I think I showed those to you. So every time I do the work, I end up discovering some new kind of shape that I'll want to explore again next time. And I think that's the last one. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I know, right? Jazz hands. Thank you so much. And Michon is up next. I have to get my mouse, there we go. Northfield artist, inspired by everyday objects, and take it away, Michon. There we go. Unmute.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. It's a beautiful night in Northfield, really spectacular weather. Wow, I'm really inspired by all the artists that went before me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the show in person. As I understand it, it opens on the 12th. She's shaking her head, yes. Okay,
yep, more on that.
So,
yep.
So this series is titled Airplane Boombox Car. And as an artist, I do often get my inspiration from everyday objects. And this collection of subjects comes from conversations I had with my choir mates at St. Peter's in Northfield. I've been in the choir there for 6 years, and I found that I really didn't know the other people in the choir very well, because when you're singing, you have to pay attention. You can't just be talking. And so I wanted a way to get to know those people. So I think there's about 17 people in the choir, and I visited each person in their home. And the people all live either in Northfield or around the area. And so I asked them lots of questions like, what's important to you? How do you spend your time? What are your prized possessions? And their answers often yielded really specific objects. And from those conversations, I selected one object for each person. And so the drawings, so what you're seeing on this screen are a series of drawings, and I made lots and lots of drawings. They're on heavy paper, and they're made with ink. And they were really preliminary drawings for a show that I had at the Rochester Art Center. I had a solo show there last fall with the same title. So one of the ways I work is I make lots of drawings to kind of figure out what the image might look like. So for the 17 people in the choir, I probably made 5 to 10 drawings for each object, just playing around with the ideas and seeing what they might look like. So when I draw, I'm really wanting to see sort of a materialized view of what the object looks like in my mind. We're so used to thinking about what an object looks like from the point of view of a camera. And really our minds don't think in that same way. We see things differently than a camera does, but it's really hard to access that because we're so used to what something looks like in a camera. So I'm really playing around with, what happens when I think about that object and then it's distilled through the materials I'm using and through my hands and through my eyes, through my brain, through my gut. What does it look like in my mind? That's what I'm really so fascinated with. And I want to see that image as concretely as I can. What is it? What am I seeing in my brain? And so as a result of that, I really focus more on perception than on sensation. Perception being the idea, sensation is just, what you're seeing. And so because of that, I really focus on the intrinsic details of an object, and I sort of throw out extrinsic factors. So for instance, I don't include things like the viewpoint of the observer. I don't include things like the light source, because I don't think when I'm recognizing an object in my brain, I'm not thinking about some of those details. Those are much more common for very realistic drawing. For example, if you were wanting to create something that was more illusionistic with using linear perspective, you might have one fixed point of view. But in my drawings, I'm showing multiple points of view at one time, kind of the way that my mind thinks about these. As a result, the drawings are quite abstract and they're right on the edge of being recognizable. So let's look at this example right here. In the drawings, I use surfaces like a grid of lines or a grid of dots, or sometimes I start with a wash. And for all of those, I do those because it's a way for me really to listen to the drawing and to I just look at the grid of lines or the grid of dots or the wash, and I use that to sort of direct me, and I find the images within those surfaces. So it's just a listening process. And so in this one, you can see there's like a pencil grid of lines, and then I used that to structure the shape of the football. And let's look at the next one. And then let's just look at a few of these so you can see what the objects are. This is a dog, as you can see, and I've really simplified it. In real life, the dog's name is Lucky. And for this drawing, I used sort of layers of gray, white, and black lines, and then just built those up to create the shape of the dog. And then I made this sort of very simplified two-dimensional form. Okay, let's look at the next one. Also, well, actually, let's go back to that dog once more. From these drawings, I ended up making several paintings that were for this show. But in addition to that, I made cardboard sculptures. I should have included a photo, but I made a large cardboard sculpture that looks something like that, and it's like a life-size dog. Anyway, let's look at the next one. This is a drawing of a McDonald's arch that's abstracted within a grid. And I made this because one of my friends in the choir has worked at McDonald's for 33 years. He just retired this year. Let's look at the next one. This is also drawn within a grid, and it's the drawing of a framed photo of one of the choir members' mother. And her mother passed away, and so she had lots of photos of her mother around the room. Let's look at the next one. This is a boombox. And for this one, I started out with a grid of triangles, and you can see that I made the grid really loose. So I draw the grid just freehand with a pencil. And then I used 2 tones of gray in the back, and then I made the object in black and white so it would stand out strong against that more middle tone background. And the next one. This one is a drawing of a book. And actually this one's representing, this one was from a conversation with my husband, who's also in the choir. And he's a big fan of Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, and this is a quote from that book. Let's look at the next one. Football helmet, I guess you can probably see that. When I'm making these, I really don't know what's going to happen. I just start out and start playing around, and that makes art making fun. If I know it's going to turn out like in the before I start, I may as well not even start because I don't find that to be a lot of fun. So, you know, I just started trying to draw this helmet, and then started with a pattern around it, and I just figured out where it would go, and it just came into my mind to make some larger shapes. So that's just part of the creative process, I guess. Let's look at the next one. This is an airplane, again, really abstracted on a grid of dots. And one of the things you can notice on this one, if you look closely, is there's an area where you can see these sort of white marks. And those are basically, when I first drew the plane, I had this shape slightly different. And then I covered up some of those dots with white paint. And I could have concealed those by putting a gray wash over the top, but I leave those white dots because I really want you to see the mistakes. It just shows sort of the doubt that I have as I'm working the process, and I think the mistakes make it just more real and more human. So I like those to be a part of it. Okay, let's look at the next one. This is just a gallery view, and it shows the scale. The drawings are small. I think they're maybe about 10 by 12. And then in the back there, you can see a larger painting. That's on canvas. That's the only large piece that I have in the show. The rest are smaller drawings. And the painting is made with a matte acrylic, and I believe it's 72 inches tall by 60 inches wide. And let's look at the next one. Yeah, there we go. And I photographed this one in my studio just because you can see it just a little bit better, but it's very repetitive, and you can see it's a car on a large field that's sort of undulating. It looks like there's a lot of motion there. Okay, and the next one. These are some McDonald's fountain drinks, and I tried drawing it 4 different ways. I probably did maybe 10 different ways, but I picked 4 for the show. And I just played around with, you know, how might I draw this? And that's just part of the fun of drawing, is trying different things. Okay, and the next one, there's a close-up. This one's like the one that I showed you with the boom box, where it's got more of a gray background and then black and white for the object. And I really flattened the McDonald's fountain drink here, and I just made the M into a very sort of rigid vertical horizontal shape. But I think you can still recognize what it is. And the next one, here's another gallery view. Okay, and the next one, I think this is the last one. Oh yeah, there's one more. So in this photo, you can see 3 drawings of a knife. And these are just studies of one particular knife that I had in mind, and I was trying to try it out different ways. The knife belongs to one of my friends in the choir. His name's Pete, and his dad's name, well, I think his last name is Peterson actually, and they call him Pete, and they call his dad Pete. And he has this, my friend Pete has this old knife that belonged to his dad, and on the knife is carved the word Pete, and then the word and the date 1930, and that knife belonged, or was really meaningful to my friend Pete. I think that's all I have there. Okay, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. And Marilyn is still with us here. I'm going to advance. This is our time for question and answers. I am going to go to, so Monique from asked a question of Marilyn, and she said, what is the significance of the right hand entry and left hand entrance? Does it make a difference?
Of what?
When entering from the right hand side or the left hand side, maybe on meander, which is here in the gallery. Does it make a difference if you enter from the right hand side or the left hand side? Is there a significance of that?
No, you can enter either way.
Okay, great, perfect. Kay says, Tim, watching the expansion of your drawings into jewelry was a delight to experience. Thank you, Kay. To Elizabeth, what was the material for the white piece?
Oh, that was just white artist tape.
Gotcha. Do we have any other questions that we want to ask of the artists while we're here? Feel free to type them in. Oh, I guess, Marilyn, the question was about the circuit labyrinth, not the meander. Does that make a difference as to where you come into the labyrinth, if you in a circular one and the circuit one?
Oh, in the Pleiades path, the round one on the floor. You can enter at any place because it's designed that more than one person can walk it at once.
Okay.
But you end up walking it until you do the whole pattern and come back to where you began.
Gotcha. How about the 11th circuit? If could you come in from one side or the other? Does it matter which way?
That is set where you enter it. There's not a choice.
Okay. Monique, I hope that answered that. And if you have further questions, oh, I guess she wants to know, labyrinths are sometimes have a right entry and sometimes have a left entry. How do you make the choice about which one you pick?
When I make the labyrinth, I usually doubt which entrance is appropriate for that particular path. So the first labyrinth that I made was at Carleton College as a temporary labyrinth in 1996. And that was also the first time that I used dowsing as a way to determine the pattern. And what came up for me was to make a right-hand turning labyrinth. I think most of the labyrinths are left-hand turning. But it's like being a writer, left-handed person. There is a variety there.
Gotcha. And this is a great time to say, if you have additional questions, I'd be happy to get you in touch directly with the artist too. So if we want to answer more questions, I'd be happy to get you in touch. And Cheryl asks all the panelists, what do you do to take pen to paper each day? And so whoever wants to jump in and answer, are you drawing every day? What inspires you?
I don't draw every day, but I do. A lot of my work is based on drawing and doing little ink on paper experiments. And I didn't show them tonight because it didn't seem pertinent. But yeah, it's a very important aspect to my art practice.
Anybody else want to? Tim, we gotta unmute it. Love to hear what you're saying.
I too don't draw every day, although I try to spend some time in my studio thinking or hammering on a piece of metal. And that's in a sense for me a form of drawing.
Jan, did you want to chime in?
Cheryl, I find that before I begin a series or just to get ideas and let them come out, I do a lot of drawing. I have lots of sketchbooks and I try things like Michon said, that you try them in different ways and just work on several variations and until it gets the feel of being right. And I find that I like that process of, I call them thumbnail sketches. Sometimes they're 3x4 or 4x6 or squares or whatever, circles. And I just like that kind of jotting down and getting what's in my mind out into a tangible form.
Michon, yep.
Yeah, I do a combination of drawing. I've got a moleskin journal that I use on a daily basis with sketches, and then writing as well, which helps me a lot in terms of figuring out what I'm trying to do. And then I also, especially at night, in the evening to relax, I'll maybe listen to a podcast and just do some free doodling as well, and that's fun too.
Marilyn, I know you've got a piece in process right now that is partway your butterfly piece. I don't know if that applies to this question.
Yes, I don't necessarily draw every day, but I write every day. I make space to write or draw every morning. And most of my work comes through dreams or visions. And then I might work with the compass. I do a lot of work with geometry. So I guess you would say doodling with the compass. And I find some of the pieces that come to me, it may take some time before they're what I would consider finished. They come in parts, not always full blown. So I've had to learn to not try and use my mind to try and fill in the blanks or complete something. Because like I say, it is an experience of something moving through me more than something I am creating and pushing out. So it's interesting. I have to, I go into a meditative state while I'm working, but also there are things that come through from meditative states that, then I'll put down maybe in watercolor or pen, whatever's handy. I've always been used to working in any media, and I was a sculpture major, so you know, I've worked with iron and bronze and clay and things as well. So whatever's handy to capture whatever's coming through.
Thank you, Marilyn. John, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that reflecting on what Marilyn said, grabbing whatever's handy, you know, making notes and drawings and sketches is one thing, but oftentimes, man, I'll just pick up my phone and I'll make a recording, I'll make a note, I'll take a picture or 20, you know, and sort of digest stuff later on. I mean, when I'm off the bike or out of the trout stream or out of the classroom. But I mean, I once had a professor say, as long as you're smelling the turpentine every day, I mean, he's dead now, unfortunately, but I mean, you know, take that with a grain of salt, you know, as long as we just remain mindful, you know, I mean, it's such a privilege to move through this universe, you know, with a little bit of clarity and to understand who we are and where we are and where to go next.
Well, I want to say, Judith says to Tim, hammer away, Tim. She's encouraging you to keep doing that. So I think that was the end of the questions. But again, if you think of something later on and you would like to get connected with one of these artists, email me, Heather at northfieldartsguild.org. I'd be happy to connect you with one of these artists. And thank you so much to you artists and attendees. Thank you artists for being here. It was wonderful to showcase all of you tonight. Thank you for prepping all of this virtual reception. I just want to let you know all of the work will remain on the Guild's website, including the videos and an exhibition catalog coming soon. But there are videos also on the Guild's YouTube channel, so you can see an overall virtual tour of this. And yes, drum roll, August 12th, we are going to be opening up the downtown building of the Guild. And so we will have some public hours starting August 12th. For folks to come in and see the work in person, so yay. To get the details on what's needed to come into the building and when we're open and all of that, please check the website, northfieldartsguild.org. And that way you can see everything about the show Centered Mindfulness. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for taking this time. If you know people that would have wanted to have joined us live and weren't able to, I am recording it. It will go up on the Guild's YouTube channel for you to watch at another time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Yay, take care. I am gonna go. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Heather. Thanks for a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Marilyn. Good night, everybody.
Good night.